My name is SineadKavanagh and I will be speaking to you today on my research question as part of my postgrad diploma in data analytics. The research question I will cover today is how are anonymisation techniques in mobile location data impacting the data used in crime mapping whilst handling data privacy regulation. So there's four key areas which will be covered within the scope of this research question. Data acquisition, so how are network operators obtaining the location data. Processing, for crime mapping, which is identifying crime hotspots and looking at areas of high crime density. Anonymisation to ensure criminal and victims cannot be re-identified. And data protection, which will cover the legal frameworks within the EU in this area. So the overview of content of this presentation are the introduction and motivation, literature review, which is broken into three key areas: that data acquisition, data anonymisation, and legal frameworks. The taxonomy, which is in the research paper, will be briefly discussed. The project plan, which is in the form of a Gantt chart, will be reviewed and all followed by the conclusion. So the introduction and motivation. I currently work within the telecommunication industry and have a strong interest in the volume of big data collected and the uses of this data. So as Cisco states, mobile data traffic will grow at a rate of 47% per annum until 2021. And as the graph shows, in 2021 there will be 49 exabytes compared to 2017, where there is 11 exabytes currently being obtained by the network operator. This growth in data will lead to more visibility of location trajectory of an individual, which means that network operators will be able to pinpoint specifically where an individual is and the time. So location-based data can be used for multiple purposes, and the one this research question will focus on is the identification and prediction of crime via crime mapping, so identifying crime hotspots, which can be used for predictive policing. So the two legal frameworks which cover data protection in this area are the General Data Protection Regulation and the e-Privacy Regulation, which will be covered later on in this presentation. So to start a literature review, we will look at data acquisition. So network location is collected using call detail records. One point to note is throughout this presentation, we will be discussing network location and not GPS location. Network location is the location obtained by the cell towers when a person makes a phone call or sends an SMS, versus GPS location, which is more specific and is used based on the acceptance of GPS location being tracked when a person downloads an application on their mobile device. There are some limitations with network location, one being that an SMS or a call must be sent for the location data to be picked up, and secondly is the geofence is not as accurate as the GPS is, so it ranges from 0.4 kilometers in an urban area to 3 kilometers in a rural area. This network location data, however, can be used for crime mapping / spatial crime analysis to identify areas with a high density of crime. So two methods used for crime mapping using this network location data is the GETIS or GI statistic and the nearest neighbour hierarchical clustering. So the GETIS or GI statistic assigns a value, which is the Z score, to specific features of location data and clusters them up so that characteristics and behaviours of crime can be identified. This can be used in association with nearest neighbour hierarchical clustering, which applies a nearest neighbour index to specific clusters. So once the GETIS or GI statistic clusters up the characteristics of a crime, the nearest neighbour index value will be assigned, and this will be able to identify if there is an inflation or reduction in specific crime areas. Data anonymisation is extremely important to ensure that re-identification of the criminal and the victim cannot be obtained. So one point to note is the law enforcement must have a clear understanding between the difference between anonymisation and pseudonymization as outlined by the Data Protection Commission. Anonymisation ensures re-identification cannot be irreversibly engineered, which means if you have the location data of a person and you cross-reference this with another data set, that person cannot be specifically identified. There are a number of different techniques for anonymization used within the crime area using location data, and we will discuss two of them. However, for every technique, the Data Protection Commission does state that anonymity must be incorporated, which means there must be a minimum number of values for the data to be used. So semantic cloaking and geomasking are two techniques which can be used for anonymization. Semantic cloaking looks at points of interest for an individual, and based on the duration of time spent within specific locations, semantic labels can be assigned to them. So if you are at a specific location from 8:30 to 6 o'clock, that will normally be denoted your work location. Geomasking alters the original location by displacing at random the original data point. So normally you will have a geofence around a location, say 0.4 kilometers, and you will slightly move the original location around that circle. As you can see, the semantic cloaking and geomasking will reduce the accuracy of this data. The legal framework which is involved within this area is the General Data Protection Regulation and the e-Privacy Regulation. Both are due to be changed and implemented across the EU in May 2018. So the GDPR regulates collection, processing and utility of individuals' data across every industry. However, the e-Privacy Regulation regulates data privacy on all e-communications, so Internet of Things, mobile apps, etc. It is important to note that within the General Data Protection Regulation, there is a data protection directive for police and criminal justice authorities, which will be implemented in 2018 to ensure the transparency of data collection, which results in law enforcement must be able to rigorously explain in court how the data was obtained and processed for a specific case. So the impacts of framework is that the law enforcement is both the data processor and the data controller. So they must have full visibility of the framework, and an increase in data privacy regulation will result in a reduction in accuracy and possibly the utility of data. A brief overview of the taxonomy, which is in the research question paper. So you have the research question, the subsections, and all the references relating to the different areas. The project plan was built using Tableau. The semester schedule was considered when the Gantt chart was being built. So as the last exam is on the 13th of January, this research will not begin until the 14th, and it will take approximately 172 days. As you can see from Tableau, the tasks are colour identified. There's approximately 23 tasks ranging from January to June, with the duration of the tasks being spelt here. So to conclude and to identify future research works. So the research question was, how are anonymization techniques, mobile location data, impacting the data used in crime mapping whilst handling data privacy regulation? Whilst further research needs to be investigated by the author, from initial investigation, anonymizations and legal frameworks which regulate in data privacy are impacting how mobile location is used in crime mapping, which, as we can see before, anonymization will reduce the accuracy of the data, which may reduce the utility of the data. Mobile network location data has limitations, which was discussed previously. The geofence ranging from 0.4 kilometers to 3 kilometers is not as accurate as GPS location, and compliance will reduce accuracy and possibly utility of data. Future research in this area is the combination of GPS and network location to be used for crime identification and prediction, and a research into crime patterns in a local context, looking at cultural behaviour to see how these impact on crime mapping. So that's the end of my research question. Thank you for listening. Thank you.